They gave him the mansion on the hill and handed me a crumbling house with vines in the floorboards like they were trying to bury me in the past. But the funny thing about broken places, they don't just fall apart, they hide things. Welcome back to Betrayal HQ, where silence tells the truth, and the forgotten always find their way back to the light. Today's story starts with a key no one wanted me to hold, but what it unlocked changed everything. Before the funeral, before the manila envelope, before the rusted key hit my palm like a quiet insult, I had a rhythm, a life that wasn't loud, but it made sense. I lived in a small cottage near the edge of the woods, not far from town, but far enough to hear the birds more than the cars. Mornings were slow, honest things. The kettle would whistle around 6:30. I'd let the steam fog up the window before I moved. That's how I measured peace, by how long I could stare out that window without needing to say a word. I worked with my hands, nothing flashy, just enough carpentry jobs to keep the bills honest and the days full. A lot of sanding, staining, fixing what people thought was ruined. I like that. Giving things one more life. You can feel the silence stretch between sentences now, grief starting to hum underneath. We weren't close, me and my brother, but we weren't enemies either. Growing up, we shared a room, shared birthday cakes. I always got the smaller piece, not because I was told to, but because it felt right. He was older. He needed more. That's what I told myself. Mom used to sit on the porch with a crossword puzzle and lemonade, always in her garden robe no matter the season. She'd say, "Quiet boys grow strong roots." I held on to that, even when the house got too quiet for anyone to hear it. I didn't have much, but I wasn't missing anything either. I knew the sound of my floorboards, the scent of pine in the morning, the way winter sunlight hit the front steps like a photograph. And if you asked me then, before the will, before the dust and lies, I'd have told you, I had everything I needed, just long enough to let the weight settle. But you never really know what they think of you until you're left out of the story you helped build. You don't always notice when someone starts pulling away. Not when you're raised to stay still, to keep things together. Take my brother for example. Nathan, 2 years older, 2 inches taller, and always just enough louder to fill a room before I could step into it. Growing up, he knew how to turn every moment into a mirror for himself. He smiled wide at funerals, laughed too loud at the dinner table, and when Dad passed, he slipped into that role like it had been waiting for him all along. We weren't enemies, but I was background, useful but forgettable. He once said right after our mother's diagnosis, "You're lucky. You don't have to make the big decisions." That stuck with me. Like being quiet was a gift I hadn't earned. Let it hang. Then there was Clara, my wife, ex-wife now. Soft voice, sharp mind. She liked order. Dishes stacked a certain way. Light bulbs at 40 watts. For a while we were a quiet kind of happy, but the kind that needs maintenance. The kind that cracks if no one speaks up. I remember once, she looked at me across the dinner table when the roof had started leaking and said, "Do you ever wish you had more ambition?" I said, "I have what I need." She didn't answer, just smiled. That kind of smile that feels like she's already imagined a different life without you in it. She left before the will was even cold, said she needed clarity. I never fought it. When someone starts speaking in past tense while you're still in the room, you don't ask them to stay. And the kids, well, they weren't mine. Clara came with 2 from her first marriage. I raised them like my own, packed their lunches, taught them to drive. But when she left, they left with her. I haven't heard from either in 3 birthdays. The silence wasn't loud. It was surgical, clean. I had friends too, or at least people who shook my hand after work and meant it. One of them, Gary, once told me, "You've got a good heart, man, but the world eats quiet hearts for lunch." I laughed, but that sentence never left me. So yeah, my world wasn't empty, but it wasn't full of people who stayed either. And when the will was read, and the lawyer didn't even look me in the eye, that was just the last confirmation of what I already knew. Some people walk out of your life with a bang. Others leave the door open just wide enough to make you wonder if it's your fault. Before everything changed, before the crumbling house, the crooked will, the silence they wrapped in ribbon, there were only a few things that mattered to me. None of them could be bought. More than anything, I wanted to make my father proud. He wasn't a perfect man, but he was a steady one. He believed in showing up, in fixing what broke, in paying people on time. He said, "Your name is a receipt. Make sure it's worth what people paid for it." And I tried. I really did. When he died, it wasn't the mansion I missed. It was the way he used to nod at me from the porch after I finished mowing the lawn. Like, "You're doing it right, even if no one sees it." That nod meant everything. And then there was Ethan, Clara's boy. He wasn't mine by blood. But for a few years, you couldn't have told me otherwise. He used to sit on the garage steps while I worked, asking questions I never got tired of answering. "Why do you sand it twice? So it lasts longer. Why don't you just buy a new one?" Because things with history deserve a second chance. I wanted him to grow up believing that showing up was enough. That you didn't need to be loud, or rich, or ruthless to be a man worth remembering. That's what I wanted him to see in me. But when Clara left, she took him with her, and he never looked back. Even Clara, even when things got hard, I stayed because I thought love was built in the staying. I thought if I kept the lights on and the promises quiet, she'd see it. That maybe one day she'd turn to me and say, "I'm glad you didn't leave when I started pulling away." But people don't say things like that, they just leave. So yeah, I didn't have much, but I had my name. I had a garage full of tools my father left behind. And I had the hope, maybe naive, that someone would look at me and say, "You did it right," even if no one else saw it. What I didn't know was that the people closest to me, they'd already decided I wasn't worth remembering. Not in a will, not in a story, not even in a thank you. And that's what made that envelope hit harder than the coffin. It never starts with a knife. It starts with silence, with small things that are easy to ignore until they pile up and bury you. I remember the first time Nathan didn't return my call. It was 2 days after Mom's second fall. I'd left a voicemail just asking if he could stop by the hospital. He never did. When I asked him about it, he said, "I didn't think she'd want to see me." But that wasn't the truth. She always asked about him. She just stopped expecting answers. Then came the garage job. I'd built a cedar bench for Clara's friend. A favor. When the payment didn't come, I asked if she could check in. She said, "Maybe don't worry about it. You do this stuff because it matters to you, right?" The way she said it, it didn't sound like kindness. It sounded like permission to be used. One night, I walked into the kitchen and her phone lit up on the counter. Nothing scandalous, just a name I hadn't heard before. 3 missed calls and a "we still on for Friday." When she came back into the room, she flipped the phone over without a word. I didn't ask, but I stopped offering to pick her up from work after that. Even Ethan, he stopped asking me to help with homework. One night, I found one of his assignments in the trash. Math equations, all wrong. He told me his teacher didn't care, but I could see it in his eyes. He just didn't want my help anymore. At dinner, the conversation got smaller. First, we stopped talking about politics. Then we stopped talking about the weather. Then we just stopped. Nathan stopped inviting me to Sunday dinners. Clara stopped asking if I'd be home late. Ethan stopped saying goodnight. And somewhere in that quiet unraveling, I told myself it was just life. People grow. Things change. But deep down I knew. The temperature in my world had dropped, and I was the only one still standing by the fire. I didn't say anything. Because saying something means you're ready to hear the answer. And I wasn't. Not yet. Sometimes I wonder if the people who betray you ever remember the days they needed you most. I remember a night when Nathan called me. 3 in the morning, voice cracked like gravel. His wife had walked out on him. I got in the truck without even brushing my teeth, drove an hour to his porch, and sat with him until the sun came up. Didn't say much. Didn't need to. Sometimes just being there is louder than any words. Or the time Clara lost her job right after the kids' school fees were due. We sat at the kitchen table, and I pushed over the envelope I'd been saving for new tools. She didn't cry. She just said, "You always think ahead." She kissed my hand that night like she hadn't in months. It was the first time I felt like I was enough. Ethan used to come into the garage every Saturday. He'd hand me bolts while I worked, ask questions like, "How come wood smells good when it's being cut?" I'd laugh, tell him, "Because it remembers being alive." He liked that answer so much he wrote it in a school essay once. He called me Dad in that essay. I never corrected it. Even Mom, she used to save the newspaper crossword for me, circling the clues she thought I'd like. "You're better at the long ones," she'd say. She knew how my mind worked. Quiet, methodical, soft around the edges. It wasn't a perfect life. We didn't dance in the rain, or say things like forever out loud. But there were moments that made it feel like I mattered, like I was seen. And now they pretend those moments never happened. They've rewritten history to fit the new script. And somehow, I've been cast as the extra in a story I helped build. But memory doesn't lie. Not when you've paid for it in silence. It happened on a Tuesday. Clouds low, air damp, like the world knew something I didn't. The funeral was quiet. Not somber. Quiet. The kind where people are more afraid of saying too much than saying goodbye. Nathan stood at the front, shaking hands like a politician, thanking people for coming. He even wore Dad's watch, our father's watch, said it made him feel close. He hadn't worn it once while the man was alive. I stayed near the back. That's where they wanted me. Not one person asked how I was holding up. Not Clara. Not Ethan. They walked right past me like I was part of the church furniture. After the service, the family gathered in the lawyer's office. They brought out the tea, the folders, the clipped tones. I sat in the corner, holding my breath without realizing it. Then the will was read. Nathan, the family estate, all financial holdings, assets and titles. Me, the secondary property at Route 9, all remaining storage contents. That was it. No explanation, just a key in an envelope, rusted like the truth. I looked up at Nathan. He was already smiling, not gloating, just satisfied. The kind of smile that says, "I've been planning this a long time, and I knew you wouldn't stop me." Clara put her hand on his shoulder, not mine, and Ethan didn't even look at me. He just stared out the window, like maybe he'd been told this was what was fair. And the lawyer? He cleared his throat and said, "I know this may come as a surprise." I said nothing, because I knew my voice didn't belong in that room. That was the first moment I realized I wasn't part of this family anymore. I'd been edited out, erased clean, like I'd never mattered. No shouting, no accusations, just a smile and a key. I didn't drive off right away. I just sat there in my truck, the key still in the ignition, wondering how the hell we got here. One minute you're someone's son, someone's brother, someone's husband, and the next you're just the name they skip over in a folder. I looked down at the envelope in my lap. No note, no explanation, just a key, rusted around the edges, cold in my hand, like it had been waiting in a drawer for this moment, for me to finally mean nothing. And the thing that cut deepest? It wasn't the property. It wasn't the silence. It was the look on Nathan's face, like this had always been the plan, and he'd just been waiting for the paperwork to catch up. I tried to remember the last time I hugged Mom, the last time she called just to hear my voice, the last time she looked at me like I mattered more than convenience. I couldn't. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a clerical error, a misunderstanding we'd all laugh about over coffee later. But the truth was already tightening its grip. They didn't forget me. They just left me out on purpose. I could have turned the engine off, could have gone home. But instead, I followed the road toward that crumbling house they thought I'd never open the door to. And I didn't know it yet, but that door was about to swing open on everything they tried to bury. As I pulled up to the old house on Route 9, the one with the porch that dipped like a tired back, I started remembering things I'd worked hard to forget. See, the part no one knew, because I never needed credit, is that I once saved Nathan's name. He was 27, deep in debt, got in over his head with a bad investment, some crypto scheme he couldn't pronounce, much less explain. He called me one night, voice shaking, telling me he might lose the house. Not the mansion. This was before all that. I took out a personal loan, quiet, fast, never told Mom, never asked for it back. He paid everyone else off and kept climbing the ladder like nothing happened. But he never mentioned it again, not once, not even in a thank you card, just moved forward like I'd been his safety net by design. Clara too. There was a moment, years before she left, when I knew something had happened, a text she couldn't explain, a business trip that didn't add up. I never pushed. I didn't want to break the quiet we'd built, even if it was already cracked. I forgave her before she confessed, not because I was weak, but because I believed in protecting what we still had left, even if it was only habit. And when Dad passed, it was me who stayed behind to pack up his things, me who sorted through every photo, folded every shirt, boxed every paper. Nathan showed up once, walked through the house, picked up a watch, and left. I told myself it was okay, that I wasn't doing it for thanks, but some part of me still waited for it, still hoped someone would say, "You held this family together longer than anyone ever noticed." But nobody said that. And now they were calling me the burden, the one who got the scraps because that's all he could handle. Turns out, the biggest mistake I made was thinking my silence meant something to the people who benefited from it. I didn't expect to find anything. When I opened the door to the house they left me with, I thought I was stepping into rot. I didn't know I was walking straight into the truth. The floors creaked like they were trying to say something. The windows groaned. The air was thick with dust and memory. But it was the fireplace that spoke first. There was a floorboard just off-center, raised slightly, lipped wrong. I stepped on it and heard the kind of hollow thump that doesn't come from time but from something hidden beneath it. I pried it up with my hand. No tools, just instinct. Underneath, wrapped in an old cloth that smelled like cedar and mothballs, was a metal box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all in my mother's handwriting, all addressed to me. The first one was dated 3 months before she passed. The second, 6 months before that. Somehow she had written me for over a year, and I never received a single one. I read through shaking hands. Each letter peeled back something I didn't want to see. She apologized for the distance, for the decisions made behind closed doors, for the things I couldn't stop but couldn't let go unchecked. Her words, not mine. And then she mentioned it. A second will, drawn up, signed, witnessed, filed with her lawyer, a different one. She named me as co-heir, half the estate, half the land, equal, but that version was never read aloud. She wrote, "I'm sorry if this reaches you late. If you're reading this from that house, then someone made a choice not to deliver what was mine to give." That's when it clicked. The silence, the strange way Nathan smiled, the lawyer's discomfort, Clara's hand on his shoulder, Ethan's averted eyes. They knew, or worse, they helped. I set the letter down and just stared at the wall, not crying, not yelling, just remembering. Every bill I covered, every moment I stayed loyal, every sacrifice I made quietly so they could speak louder. They didn't just forget me, they erased me, and they smiled while doing it. That was the moment I stopped being quiet. Not loud, not messy, just done. I didn't call Nathan, didn't show up at his door, didn't send angry messages or demand answers. I just folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and stood up. The next morning, I shaved, pressed a clean shirt, drove into town and parked 2 blocks away from a lawyer I knew didn't play golf with my brother. Her name was Mayfield. No nonsense. She didn't ask why I was there. I slid the letters across her desk. She opened one, read 2 lines and said, "You've waited long enough." That afternoon, I requested copies of my mother's medical records, her banking transactions, the official will she signed a year before her death, filed by her but never surfaced. Turns out, it was there, filed, stamped, but withdrawn 6 months later by my brother's lawyer. Her signature wasn't on the withdrawal, but his was. Still, I said nothing. No confrontation, no family meeting, just paper. I even stopped returning calls. Clara messaged me once, "Hope you're okay." I left it on read. They were all still smiling, I'm sure, still eating dinner together, still proud of how smoothly the handoff went. But while they toasted to their win, I was in the background, collecting the thread they forgot to cut. See, revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's ink, and silence, and time. Long pause. Let the viewer sit in it. I didn't want to hurt them. I just wanted the truth to walk in the front door and sit at the table they said I didn't deserve. The best part about being erased is that no one watches you anymore. They stopped checking in, stopped wondering what I might do next. So I moved like fog, slow, quiet, impossible to track. First, I transferred the deed on the Route 9 property into a trust, not for security, just to remove my name from anything they thought they could trace. Then I stopped paying the maintenance fees on the shared cemetery plots. Let them notice that one themselves. I wondered if they'd blame the groundskeeper. I went to the county clerk's office and pulled public land records. Found a small parcel next to the main estate, overlooked, unclaimed. Used part of my father's life insurance payout to buy it in cash. No fanfare, no title on the gate. I started collecting receipts, emails, bank withdrawals, phone logs from the nursing home. Every visit Nathan didn't make, every medication charge that went missing, every invoice rerouted to his assistant. One night I called the old estate attorney, the one who'd retired just before Mom's health started slipping. He remembered her, said she was sharp, precise, said she'd cried the day she signed the updated will, but not from sadness, from relief. The withdrawal from the registry file, not my mother's signature. That alone was enough to open a formal investigation. Still, I never spoke a word. No threats, no warnings. I walked into the bank where Clara had frozen our joint account and removed my name. The teller smiled and said, "You sure about this?" I said, "More than I've ever been." Until I showed them the updated will and filed a correction with the insurance board. No arguments, no delays, just signatures, just truth. They didn't notice me pulling the rug, because they thought I was still lying on it. They were sipping wine in the mansion. I was collecting bricks. I sat in the cabin one night. Fire low, no noise but the ticking of the old clock my father left behind. The papers were in order. The evidence was airtight. The lawyer was confident. And still, I stared at that box of letters and asked myself a question I couldn't shake. Maybe I should have just let them have it. The mansion, the land, the money, the memory. The memory. What's the cost of being right when it means you stand alone? I wasn't built for war. I wasn't raised to tear things down. I was raised to fix them, to sweep the porch even when the storm wasn't done, to let people take what they needed, because I thought that made me strong. But now I was the man filing documents behind closed doors, asking investigators to knock on my brother's life, telling a judge that my family forged our mother's name like it was nothing. And the part that scared me most, it didn't feel wrong. It felt overdue. There's a kind of grief that follows justice, the kind where you win, but no one's there to clap. I kept thinking, would Dad be proud of me for this? Would Ethan understand it one day? Would Clara ever wonder if the man she left behind was the one who held the line she crossed? I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't the same either. I'd built something out of silence, and I wasn't sure if that made me strong or just cold. But then I looked at that last letter, my mother's words scrawled in soft ink. "You were always the quiet one, but I never mistook your silence for weakness." And I remembered. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Still, some nights I wonder if I lost something too. Not the house, not the money, just the part of me that used to believe silence was enough. It was a voicemail. That's all it was. I'd called the old house phone out of habit one evening, just to hear the answering machine, I think. Didn't realize Nathan had kept the number, or that he'd forgotten how voicemail works. An hour later, my phone buzzed a new message. I pressed play, and there it was, his voice, laughing, not drunk, just arrogant. He was talking to Clara. I knew her voice anywhere. They were toasting something, celebrating. "He never saw it coming," Nathan said. "Guy always was slow. Guess Mom figured that out too." They laughed. Then Clara added, "You sure everything's clean? He's the type to dig once he gets suspicious." Nathan said, "Let him dig. The deed's done. The ink's dry. He got what he could handle." Then, just as the message clicked off, he said one more thing. Quiet, almost like a joke. "Bet he's still in that dump of a house, waiting for someone to tell him he matters." That was it. The rope. I didn't yell, didn't call him back, didn't send it to the group chat. I sent it to my lawyer, and to the estate board, and to the forensic handwriting team, who had just finished matching Nathan's signature to the withdrawal form on the second will. The voicemail became the thread that unraveled everything. Intent, deception, malice, all in his own words. Up until then, they could have claimed confusion, could have called it a misunderstanding, could have played innocent. But the moment he bragged about it, he gave me something more powerful than silence. He gave me proof. Funny how the loudest mistake he ever made was something I never asked to hear. It happened on a Wednesday. No storm, no thunder, just the quiet sound of things finally falling into place. Nathan was in the middle of a backyard renovation, installing a pool, I heard. Clara was overseeing a catering contract for some charity gala. They were preparing for a summer that wasn't meant to be theirs. I didn't show up, but the documents did. A court injunction, estate freeze, fraud investigation notice, hand-delivered by a process server who said my name like it mattered. Their bank accounts were locked, their property title flagged. The board ordered a forensic review of every asset transfer in the last 12 months. And the second will, the one Mom signed, the one they buried, was now officially back on record. Clara's phone lit up that morning. She called me, twice. I didn't answer. Nathan called once, left no message. Instead, I called the locksmith. The Route 9 house. I transferred the deed backdated sealed, turned it into a private living trust under my name and Dad's. Made it clear in my statement. I don't want the mansion. I want what was mine. I never raised my voice, never threatened, never gloated. I just let the papers speak louder than the man who stole everything in whispers. 2 weeks later, I watched from a cafe window as Nathan walked out of the estate attorney's office. No tie, head down, papers in hand. The smile was gone. Justice doesn't always knock like a fist. Sometimes it slips through the cracks you never thought someone would find. And when it finally shows up, it doesn't need to explain itself. It just is. I didn't go looking for closure, didn't wait for apologies, didn't expect anyone to call what they did by its real name. But people show you who they are in the silence that follows the truth. Nathan didn't respond publicly. No statement, no phone call. But I saw him once, outside the courthouse after the final ruling. He looked at me, and I looked back. And in that second he knew. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't chased. I had just endured. And that broke him more than any accusation ever could. Clara moved cities. I heard it through a cousin's cousin. No goodbye, no letter, just absence. And I was fine with that. Ethan sent me a message, 6 words. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not because I was bitter, because forgiveness takes more than a sentence. And the others, the ones who stayed quiet at the will reading, they stayed quiet afterward too. But the next time I passed by the family church, a woman I barely knew stopped me on the steps and said, "We were wrong about you." I didn't answer her, just nodded, because sometimes there's nothing to say, and sometimes that's enough. No shouting, no courtroom drama, no big scene, just looks, avoided eyes, silent acknowledgments wrapped in shame. The mansion still stands, the porch still creaks, but the people who thought it defined power can't sit inside it the same way anymore. That's the thing about justice. When it arrives quietly, it stays loud in the places pride once lived. People think revenge changes everything. That once you get justice, you go back to who you were. But the truth is, I don't even remember who that man was anymore. I don't smile as easily now. Don't wait on calls that won't come. I don't look for approval in empty places. I still sand down wood on Saturdays. Still drink my coffee at the window. Same mug, same hands. But I move different. Slower, straighter. There's a quiet that comes after the storm. It doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like weight leaving your shoulders one sigh at a time. I don't hate Nathan. I don't miss Clara. I don't expect Ethan to understand, but I don't carry them anymore. Mom once wrote, "The world won't always clap when you do the right thing, but do it anyway. That's how you sleep at night." Justice didn't fix everything, didn't bring back the years I gave away quietly, but it returned something I didn't know I'd lost. My name, my worth, my place in the story. So no, I'm not the same man they left behind in the corner of a lawyer's office, holding a rusted key and a silent question. That man was still hoping they'd remember him. This one? He remembers himself, and that is enough. If you've ever been forgotten, counted out, erased, let this be your reminder. You don't need their permission to matter. When they gave me the rusted key, they thought it was an insult. They handed it to me like a punishment, a reminder that I wasn't part of the real family, that I belonged somewhere forgotten, unpolished, unimportant. But they forgot something. Keys don't just open doors. They prove ownership. That crumbling house, with its sagging porch, peeling paint, and creaking floors, became mine, not just on paper, but in spirit. It was the only place no one tried to take from me, and inside it, buried beneath dust and silence, was the truth they thought they'd locked away. They gave me the key to a secret they couldn't erase. They thought they handed me defeat, but they handed me the map. I still keep that key, hung on a nail by the back door, not polished, not cleaned, just whole. And every time I walk past it, I don't see a reminder of what they tried to take. I see proof that I survived what they built without me. Sometimes the ugliest gift is the one that frees you. Sometimes the house they thought would break you becomes the place where you finally remember who you are. And the key they gave you with a smirk becomes the quiet proof that you never needed the mansion. You just needed a place they didn't control. I thought that was the end of it. I had the key. I had the truth. I had peace. For once, the story was over. Let it feel final, just for a second. But 2 weeks after the final ruling, a letter showed up at my door. No return address, no handwriting I recognized, just my name, and one sentence inside. "You didn't find everything." Breath. I checked the box. All the letters were there. The court file hadn't changed, but something about the envelope felt off. I've been wondering ever since. Was it her? A mistake? Or just someone who knows more than they should? Maybe the truth doesn't end. Maybe it just gets passed like a key, waiting for someone else to turn the lock. I still keep it. That envelope, folded inside the box they never meant for me to find. Because some stories, they don't close. They just wait for you to come back. I didn't swing. I didn't scream. I didn't take more than what was already written in my name. But some nights, when the house is quiet and the wind moves like footsteps through the hallway, I still ask myself, was I wrong to protect what was mine? They said I should have let it go. That holding on made me bitter. That proving the truth only left ashes. But if you hand someone a rusted key and expect them to disappear, don't be surprised when they come back and unlock everything you tried to hide. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. I wanted peace that didn't come with a price tag. And I wanted to know I wasn't crazy for thinking loyalty should matter. But maybe you know that feeling. When you give quietly, serve without credit, protect people who'd never do the same for you. Until one day the silence breaks. So tell me, does choosing to protect yourself make you the villain in their story? Or just the one who finally said enough without needing to explain why? I'll never know what they tell themselves now, whether they sleep fine, whether they regret anything at all. But I know this, I was never the problem. I was just the piece that stopped fitting once I stopped staying quiet. They thought I'd do nothing, that I'd fold like they wrote me that way. But I just waited until they handed me the rope and smiled, not realizing I'd already tied the knot with their own lies. That's the thing about quiet men. They don't yell. They don't chase, they don't warn, they just remember, and when it matters most, they answer. You only heard my voice for a reason, because it was my silence they mistook for surrender, my breath they waited to break, my name they left off the pages. You didn't see courtroom clips, no cameras in their faces, no reactions caught in high definition, because this story doesn't belong to them. It never did. Everything you saw was through my eyes, my hands, my memory, because pain doesn't need a second opinion, and justice doesn't need an audience. I didn't tell you what they felt. I told you what I carried. And if you felt it too, you already know how heavy that silence really was. They'll have their version. Let them. But this was mine. I didn't find the letters right away. They sat under that floorboard for weeks, maybe months. I only found them because the broom caught a splinter that didn't belong. 2 years before she died, Mom had already rewritten the will. 2 years and not one word said to me. 5 months after the funeral, the voicemail came. Not because they slipped, but because they thought I was done looking. I waited 3 more weeks after that, before filing the affidavit. Not because I needed time, because I wanted them to waste theirs. Some things don't happen in a rush. Some truths take longer to get dressed. But just because it took time, doesn't mean it didn't hit like lightning the moment it arrived. Maybe you've been there. Maybe not with a house or a will, but with people who smiled when they took what was yours. Would you have stayed silent, or found your voice in the one place they told you it didn't matter? Would you have fought back, or just walked away thinking maybe peace meant pretending it didn't hurt? What would you do if the people you fed with your own hands turned and starved you? If they gave you a key that was meant to shame you, would you bury it? Or would you unlock the door to the truth they prayed you'd never find? Tell me in the comments, because some stories, the best ones, don't end. They begin again every time someone says that happened to me too. If this story echoed anything inside you, subscribe, because here at Betrayal HQ, the quiet ones finally speak.